Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this great event, How to Matter in the AI Age, Lessons from Home, School, and Work. We have a great group of people with us today to talk about some of the really deep issues about being human in an AI age. I'm Rebecca Winthrop. I am the director of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. And this is the fourth event in a series that we have been running across this year around AI, learning, education, children, uh, human development, human dignity. The first was really around the role of socialization in and what AI may or may not do to children's development socially. The second was really looking at the role of AI in extending access to those young people who are on the fringes of education, particularly those young people who don't have access to education around the globe. The third panel was really in partnership with the American Superintendents Association, looking at executive function skills, working memory, attention, these types of things, and how AI may or may not play a role in their development and young people as real foundational pillars to the house of learning. And now we are here all today in December looking at this question of what it means to matter as a person in our world, to have relevance, to have meaning, to feel we belong in an AI era. And we will culminate this series next month in January, on January 14th, when we will launch our Brookings Global Task Force on AI in Education report. So this webinar series over the year has been accompanying our global research, which is across 50 countries, US and around the world, and has involved many hundreds of people and incredible experts, for which we are very grateful, really doing a pre-mortem on AI and students' learning and development, looking at the risks, looking how you mitigate the risks and how you harness the benefits. So stay tuned for that one in the new year. We will have Kara Swisher hosting, and it will be a great event, and we'll be launching the report and sharing the recommendations. But for now, for today's meal, I would love to invite my wonderful colleague, E.J. Dione, who's a senior fellow here at Brookings in Governance Studies. He is also a professor of the Foundations of Democracy and Culture at Georgetown University and a contributing columnist to the New York Times, who will be our moderator. Please, EJ, come on video as well as the rest of the panelists, and I will hand this event over to your capable hands. We are waiting for EJ.
Pardon me.
Great.
I'm trying to get on here.
I know.
There we
There
go.
you are.
Sorry, my fingers weren't working. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here. I've so admired the work Rebecca has done over so many years, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what I want to say is that Rebecca and pretty much and everybody involved here and everybody on this Zoom are way ahead of the curve. Rebecca started planning this event months ago. And the latest issue of The Economist has on its cover a central topic that we are going to be discussing today, how AI is rewiring childhood. And I just want to read a couple of sentences from it because it really goes to a lot of what we want to discuss today. In Work and Play, AI is rewiring childhood, upbeat stuff. It promises every child the kind of upbringing previously available only to the rich, with private tutors, personalized syllabuses, and bespoke entertainment. But then it goes on to say it's a future filled with opportunities and hidden traps. A bespoke upbringing can also be a lonely and atomized one. And parents should think twice before entrusting a child to a word regulation machine, whether it is sewn into a bear or not. Government should not give AI firms the leeway they gave the social networks. And I like this in particular about teachers. They must redouble their efforts to teach things that a robot can't. to debate, to disagree, and to get along with, perhaps even to appreciate people who are not as sycophantic as a chatbot. And Carrie in particular on our panel, who has worked a lot with parents, is going to talk about that. At the same time, this weekend also, the New York Times wrote a story about Pope Leo. And as folks who follow these things know, Pope Leo is, in a good way, obsessed with AI and its moral impact. He picked the name Leo because the last Pope Leo was very involved with the morality and the social obligations in a new industrial society. That was Leo the 13th. Leo the 14th is very concerned with technology and in particular, artificial intelligence. Just recently, in an address he gave before a trip to Turkey, he said, and I quote him, "Even artificial intelligence simply reproduces our own preferences and accelerates processes that, on closer inspection, are not the work of machines, but of humanity itself. Let us work together, therefore, to change the trajectory of development and repair the damage already done to the unity of the human family." And that New York Times story quoted a woman called Nada Obeid in Beirut, who said she appreciated Leo's engagement with AI. As a mom of two kids in school, I actually appreciate that the Pope is speaking up about AI because facts technology is changing everything nowadays. It reminds me how important it is for us parents to really pay attention to what our kids are doing. And we're going to be talking very much about that topic. We have a wonderful panel here today that I'm going to introduce briefly. Jenny Wallace is an award-winning journalist and the author of Mattering, The Secret to a Life of Deep Connection and Purpose. It will be published in January. And she's the New York Times bestselling author of the book Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What We Can Do About It, which was named an Amazon Best Book of the Year. She contributes to the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, and I'm sure other places that go beyond the bio I have in front of me. Rebecca Winthrop is a leading global authority on education. Rebecca has not only done this work as a think tank, but she's done this work on the ground in countries all over the world. She's the director of the Center for Universal Education at Brookings, an adjunct professor at Georgetown, and her passion is ensuring that every child has the opportunity to thrive and work as an engaged citizen. And she leads extraordinary research aimed at transforming education systems around the world to better support children's learning and development. So Rebecca is going to talk about the pluses and minuses here as we go forward. And Carrie Rodriguez, who hails from my hometown of Fall River, Massachusetts. Let's shout out Fall River. She is, as she says in her biography, the mother of Matthew, Miles, and David, and the visionary founder and president of the National Parents Union, which is a groundbreaking organization that unites parents from diverse backgrounds to advocate for the rights, economic, and educational needs of America's children. The NPU has become a formidable force driving parent empowerment across the nation. And Carrie has thought a lot about how AI fits into this picture, and we're grateful to have her here. So let's start with mattering, because the whole question of how will human beings matter in an age of AI, there's a famous quote you will remind us of, Jennifer, about the AI meaning that maybe humans won't matter anymore, which is not, I think, an ideal outcome of this technology. You write that mattering is a fundamental human need that's going unmet today in our society and could worsen with the growth of AI if we don't address it. So talk about mattering, and how do you see AI threatening our sense of mattering?
Well, thank you so much, EJ. And I'm so grateful to be here. Rebecca, thank you for the invitation. Carrie, I love sharing a panel with you. Let me just quickly define what researchers refer to as mattering. Mattering is a deep, fundamental human need to feel valued and to have an opportunity to add value to the world. Researchers have been studying it since the 80s. They say after the human drive for food and shelter, it is the need to matter that drives human behavior for better or for worse. So when we feel like we matter, we show up to the world in positive ways. We want to engage, we want to connect, we want to contribute. But when we are made to feel like we don't matter, when we feel disposable, useless, worthless, we can turn against ourselves, become anxious and depressed, turn to substances, or lash out in anger. Online attacks, political extremes, road rage, these are desperate attempts to say, I'll show you I matter. And we are at, yes, we're at a technological turning point, but we're also at a humanity turning point. And so while I am, and I try to remain an optimist when it comes to AI, I can't help but see all of the dangers blaring in front of me. We are contending, let's just talk about the workforce, with according to Gallup, 10-year lows in disengagement. So, what is employee disengagement? Employees disengage when they feel like they don't matter. It's a it's a way of self-protection, really. So I am concerned that if we are not mindful about building cultures of mattering in our homes, in our workplaces, and in our wider communities, that we could further the loneliness epidemic, the anxiety, depression, substance abuse disorders that we are seeing on these huge global scales. So, the good news is that mattering is something that researchers find have ingredients letting people feel significant, appreciated, invested in, and depended on. And we can do this. This is, as the Pope was pointing out, EJ, in the article, we have a responsibility as humans to protect our humanity, to remind each other why we matter and that we do matter in this age of AI.
Thank you. And speaking of mattering, I want to remind, before I turn to Rebecca, I want to remind the audience you matter here in two ways. One is we've gotten a lot of questions in advance that I'll be interweaving into the conversation here. But also, if as you're watching you have questions, you can submit them in three ways. You can submit them to events at brookings.edu or on X or on Blue Sky using the hashtag mattering in an AI age, mattering in an AI age. So please join us with your questions, and I will get to them as we go. Um, so, Rebecca, what does AI mean for students and how they matter in school today? Talk about where your thinking is now, having thought a lot more about education than most humans and probably most AI chatbots.
Well, one of the things that Jenny just said, that employee engagement is at a 10-year low. I want to remind people that whatever's happening in the classroom shows up in the boardroom a couple years later of companies and C-suite officials trying to figure out the talent pipeline and employee engagement. And when we've been looking at this question of what is the risks and benefits of generative AI in children's learning and development for, students, we're really focused on students. The first thing we realized is you really have to think about what is going on in schools with students, before AI showed up. And we know that in education, it's almost less about the technology itself. Of course, the technology design is huge, but it's how humans use and ingest the technology. So AI has showed up on the doorstep of teachers, classrooms, and kids' cell phones around the world in a context, and I'll just use the US as an example, when students are super disengaged already. My colleague and I, Jenny Anderson, did a book called The Disengaged Teen, and we did a big study in the US around student motivation and engagement. We basically found that about half of middle school and high school students are in what we call passenger mode. This means they're physically present, have dropped out of learning, and a big reason that they feel like they just want to coast and do the bare minimum. These are the kids who are just trying to get by, is because they feel it's not relevant. They feel like whatever they're doing in school doesn't really matter. We heard that over and over. We heard it's boring. What is it for? It doesn't matter. How am I ever going to use this? So already, when AI shows up, kids feel that school doesn't really matter. And it's a big part of it is because young people just don't see the connection of the tasks they're asked to do every day in school with their development, their future, their career opportunities, their impact in the world. They're missing that connection. And I am really worried that if we aren't very careful and curate quite well how AI is rolled out in schools and frankly to students, that we're going to see a lot more kids in passenger mode because it is really easy now to just offload your homework. If you don't, some people thought, okay, I'm gonna do my math problem set because I'm gonna, get into college this way, and it's important. I'll learn. I want to, I'm motivated to do well. Well, if AI can do it in a hot minute, it is reducing young people's sense of really, what am I even here for? One of the reasons that I decided to write this book with my colleague initially, this is about 5 years ago now, was at the beginning of COVID. My own son told me and we're in DC public schools, when the schools closed and they went online, he said, and they went pass fail. He said, Mom, I don't need to do any of this online schooling because if it's not counted, as in if it's not graded, it doesn't matter. And I think that's how a lot of students perceive schools. So I think there are positives, and we can come to that AI could potentially really help students see how education matters more, but it's going to have to take a very curated approach. And I'm sure we can come back to that.
Thank you for that. I got to say, as somebody who teaches myself, I have been struggling with this question where, on the one hand, you don't want students to use AI to write their papers, and the whole concept of a paper has come into question. On the other hand, I really want my students to understand what an extraordinary research tool this can be, but it can't replace your own judgment, your own analysis, your own what you as a human bring to the topic. And it's a very tricky question, which actually goes naturally to Kerry, who thinks a lot about these very questions. And when I asked Kerry ahead of time, which question, what she wanted to start with, she clearly thinks our audience matters because she pointed immediately to a couple of questions we already got in advance. One comes from a parent coach, a person who describes themselves as a parent coach, who basically wants to ask, how are schools helping parents understand the power of AI? So, Karen, talk a bit about your work around this area, what your hopes are, what you're really worried about, and help answer that question from our audience member.
Well, EJ, I have some bad news. They're not doing a very good job, and we need to do a hell of a lot better.
But you
So
might say that.
I have to start off just being honest. It's part of who I am coming from Fall River. But the thing is, we have to, as parents, be very active in seeking out information. And even when you are the most active of parents, I mean, I spend a lot of time with parents who blame themselves because they're doing the best that they can. We're in a very difficult, economic circumstance here in the United States. You're trying to make sure you can cover the rent, that you can pay the bills, that you can keep these kids fed. And the world comes at you fast nowadays. We've got to be worried about cell phones. You got to be worried about academic performance. You got to be reading to your kid. You got to be making sure you're checking every app. And even when you do all of that, the speed at which technology is moving right now, you just can't keep up. So parents need help. There is a lot on our shoulders right now. But the good news is that I have high hopes that we as parents and families, we cannot be replaced. Because I'll tell you this morning, my little boy, because we're technophiles in our house. Like we love technology. We use it for everything from all of the Amazon technology that's probably listening to me right now and going to help me with my grocery list and everything else I got to remember. I got basketball this week, a million other things. And I use every app you can imagine under the sun and embrace AI to make sure I can keep all this stuff straight. But it did come to me this morning as, my youngest, who's 13 and in 7th grade, was running in just for that quick little extra hug before he left. That we as parents and families, like there's something that we offer and provide that can't be replaced. Because when I snatched that boy up and I gave him that hug and I looked him directly in the eye and I said, I love you. Today's going to be a great day. Don't forget, I'm proud of you. We got a big test today. We did the best we could, but no matter what happens, we're going to figure it out together. And seeing him look directly in my eye and know that he needs to hear from me and from the people who support him as the humans, the important humans in his life, I know that that's not something that can be replaced by AI technology. Now, that being said, they are trying it because there are things like chatbots and a lot of that we've got to get into, because I've talked to parents, specifically an example from the New York City public schools, parents very upset with kids as young as in pre-K and kindergarten coming home, interacting with chatbots who are telling them, I'm your best friend. You can tell me anything. And that kind of language, which makes parents really nervous and worried about, well, what are they hearing from this? Or where is this information going from this interaction? And who is this person? As at the same time as we're telling kids to be very careful about what they share, and not just with technology, but with strangers on the street. There's a lot to be talked about around like having that information and understanding what those interactions look like. But again, I'm holding on to hope that, humanity and especially moms are irreplaceable when it comes to this kind of technology.
You speak to something that Economist editorial mentioned, which is a third of American teenagers say they find chatting to an AI companion at least as satisfying as talking to a friend and easier than talking to their parents.
Well, of course
What
they do. Oh, that makes sense, right?
Right. The next sentence actually is, yes, bots threaten to create children not used to taking turns who grow up into colleagues unable to compromise and partners unfamiliar with the give and take required in a relationship. Before I go back to Jenny, what kinds of policies have you been thinking about that we actually need in this sphere? Can you sort of talk in policy terms about what do we need to do to start out in a sphere that we're going to be experimenting with for quite a while?
Just start with me.
And then I want to go back to Jenny.
For sure. We've been thinking very deeply about kids' interactions with those chatbots that I was just talking about. And the reason why kids like them is because they're intentionally creating a very frictionless experience where, a lot of chatbots are telling you exactly what you want to hear. And you're always right. And, the problem you're struggling with is just so unfair. And, it's the world as you see it. And unfortunately, the most important thing about growing up, and the reason you have parents and why you have social interaction, is that life is not frictionless. And you need that experience of struggling and grappling and having your ideas challenged. One of the most important things I say to my kids every single day is, gosh, please don't believe everything you think. Like, challenge yourself. Like, every idea that pops into your head is not the right idea. It's an idea, but let's explore it together. And I think that is one of the most critical experiences that we have to make sure that we protect for kids, because that struggle, that not always being convinced that you're correct, and understanding that just because you're being challenged, it doesn't mean that you're not important or you're wrong. It's part of growth, and it's how we get to the full human experience. It's how we get to better outcomes and better solutions. And frankly, something that they're going to have to navigate. So it's on us as the grown-ups to provide them with that really important training ground and that place to explore these kinds of experiences in safe environments. So it's not as brutal when you get out into the real world. So to that end, we are taking real action because interaction with AI chatbots in particular is not something that we want to see with kids who are under the age of 18. And just a few weeks ago, I was so pleased to be joined with parents from across the country in introducing a brand new piece of legislation with Josh Hawley and Katie Britt and Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy in the United States Senate and the Senate Judiciary Committee that would outright ban the use of or the ability for children to interact with this technology prior to the age of 18. This stuff needs to be heavily regulated. We need to be keeping our eyes on it in all spaces because unfortunately, this is something that can do real damage to our kids. There are parents who I've worked with across this country who unfortunately their children have taken their own lives or have suffered really intense, not just mental, but physical harm. And our educators are not prepared for it. We don't have resources to deal with it. And frankly, we're throwing our kids into the deep end of the pool without the support and the resources that they need. And something's got to be done to protect our kids.
You. Let me go to Jennifer. One of the questions we have received from the audience asked about steps that can be taken to ensure that AI strengthens rather than weakens human connection in the workplace. We're talking about schools a lot, but the challenge in the workplace is at least as profound. And again, particularly on your focus on mattering.
Could I, EJ, just quickly address Rebecca and Carrie's two great points? Rebecca was talking about her son. I also have three children, and my youngest son, around seventh or eighth grade, came up to me and said, "Mom, why do I have to know how to stand up in front of a class and make an argument? Why do I'm not going to be a trial lawyer. Mom, why do I have to learn how to write a paper this well? Mom, why do I have to know math and science and history? How is this relevant to the life I'm going to be living?" And it comes down to mattering. I said to my son, you need to know how to write a paper well, make a persuasive argument, because there are people in this world who are going to need you to advocate on their behalf. You have to know math and science and history because you are going to come into a world that has big problems and you and your peers are going to be tasked with trying to solve them. So it is not just about you that we achieve. We achieve not, there's a Jesuit motto, not to be better than others, but to be better for others. And what I see in my research on mattering is that our young people only believe they matter when they achieve, when they have X number of likes, when they, all of these extrinsic markers of success. As a parent, as Carrie put it, hugging your child and saying, I'm on your team, our sense of mattering is first developed through the relationship with the primary caregivers. Then it goes out into the school and it goes out into the wider community. Mattering matters throughout the lifespan. So it matters in infancy and it continues to matter into the workplace, as you were asking me, EJ. My husband and I were celebrating our 25 years together, and we went on a trip to France where we had gone 20 years
Congratulations.
before. Thank you. We'd gone on 20 years ago, we'd gone on this road trip in rural France, and so much of our time together in the car was reading maps. Is this the right way? Do I go that way? Is this the exit? 25 years later, we were able to offload that to Google Maps. This is what I'm hoping can happen in the workplace and in the wider world. We are tasked with so much input, as Carrie said. There's so much input and so much output being demanded on us today that I am hoping, like Google Maps, we will be able to take so much of the bandwidth that is spent doing tasks that we don't really need to be doing as humans, so we can open up our worlds to really focusing on what it is to be human, and that is to make people feel like they matter in the workplace, right? So taking all of these tasks off of our plates so we can re-engage our employees. We can take the time to connect them to their impact. I'll give you a little example of what this could look like. For my book Mattering, I went to a factory in Phillips, Wisconsin, where on the factory floor, they were making these huge machines that make corrugated boxes. Each person that was making a part for this big machine had a story card next to their machine that showed where that machine was going, the picture of the person who would use it, and the story of how that person was basically betting their livelihood on that machine working. These workers were able to connect with their impact. They weren't just cogs in a wheel, they were actually doing something meaningful. We can do this in the workplace. We can connect each other to our impact. And that to me is the best way to re-engage our workers. And it is necessary, not just for workplace health and productivity, but as I'm sure we'll talk about later, like the long arm of the job, that the idea that what we do at work doesn't stay at work. It spills over into our home lives. It spills over into our communities. So when we feel like we matter at work, we can show up to our kids and be those sturdy first responders that we need to be in today's world. When we don't feel like we matter for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, how can we show up and be there as we want to be that sturdy support for our kids? We can't. Researchers call it proximal separation when we are in the same room as our kids, but we are disconnected because we're replaying the sense of feeling invisible or the incivility that we experience in our workplace. I mean, even more mattering at work, researchers have found when we don't feel like we have a voice, when we feel invisible, we are less likely to engage civically in healthy, productive ways. And we are more likely, as we are currently seeing, to act out as a way of proving that we matter.
And I want to go to Rebecca, but you raise sort of a fundamental question, which we obviously will not resolve today, which is that there's a lot of fear that AI is going to gobble up a whole lot of jobs that actually, for now, give people not only livelihoods and meanings. There is a hope on the part of some economists that if AI could be used to increase the productivity of individual workers, it could actually help create more good jobs, but that allow people to have meaning and support their families. How we get this balance right is an enormous social and economic challenge that I think your sort of ideas on mattering really point to. Rebecca, the school is both a workplace and a place of education of where we raise our kids. What strategies do you think in this sphere can be used to help support students' sense of mattering, their ability to contribute? What are your thoughts on this? And we got a question in from the audience that I'll just tag on here, which is, with the danger being so high, according to so many, is it time for educators and ed organizations to take a more adversary position against big tech to slow things down? Thank you for that question. You can sort of work that into your
Yeah.
answer to the larger question that you want to address.
So I actually think that the question from the audience member you just posed is a really interesting one to think about the role of schools today in terms of kids mattering, families mattering, our communities mattering. And I think that schools have a real role to play to be countercultural to the tide that is happening to us in many ways around technology. And when I say to be countercultural, a couple of the strategies that I think are really important, it means, schools can be, because they are controlled environments in virtually every community across this country, the United States, where we are, a place to make sure young people are interacting with adults and peers without any technology intermediating that relationship. So if they're on their phones or talking to AI friends outside of school, make sure that at least for a couple hours a day, kids are, at least at school, learning to interface with each other for all the reasons that Carrie just explained, why that is important. And so I do think there's a role for schools to be countercultural and to say what we think. And I say we as an education specialist, what we think should be the way to knit AI into children's learning and development. I also think schools have a big role to play in shifting how they do teaching and learning, because a big part of why those kids in passenger mode, I'm really worried without real, just sort of, which we're kind of doing now, just sort of put the tools out there, see how it goes, let's try, let's iterate, which I get the innovator approach. It can work with for some things, but this is an incredibly powerful technology, and we're talking about kids' brains and development, and the way they use their brains when they're little is how they're going to end up as adults. So it isn't really a great time to just randomly experiment with potentially dangerous technology. So schools themselves have to shift and be less task oriented. The spine, the lifeblood of a lot of teaching and learning is around task completion. You know, finish this homework assignment, do study for this test, um, make this presentation, go here, you know, etc. And you add up points and then you get to pass. So I think what we should do, and a lot of people in the education community have been wanting to do this for a long time, and a lot of schools on the fringes of the education of most education systems across the US are doing this, but it's really time it enters the center, is to raise the bar of what we ask kids to do. It's not just about knowledge acquisition and a steady stream of tasks that actually Jenny's son was questioning, why do I have to do this? To prove that you acquired that knowledge. It should be about knowledge acquisition and then go and do something with that knowledge. That is how to engage kids. That is how to show they matter. That is how they can develop and practice their agency, which they are going to need. My colleague Jenny Anderson and I call that explorer mode in our book. They're going to need that when they exit the world. And when I say go do something, I'll give you an example. So many students that we talked to in our research, Jenny Anderson and I, who were really checked out of school, super disengaged, not even passenger mode where they're just coasting, just resistor mode. They're not there. They don't want to deal with it. They don't feel they belong. They don't buy into the whole thing, etc. Pivoted really quickly the minute they had an opportunity to do something meaningful. I want to give you two, a micro example and a big example. One fifth grader I talked to who was in Ohio, I didn't talk to her, I talked to the school principal who was tearing their hair out about the school fifth grader. And the parent, the father, was just tearing his hair out because she was refusing to go to school. Chronic absenteeism, school refusal is a huge problem. Carrie always talks about, like, don't blame us. We're trying to get our kids there. It's very hard. He would be dragging her. She'd be crying. It's just a nightmare if you're a parent and have suffered with this. Kept missing school, refusing to go to school. It's very hard. Father would eventually get her there, but always late. And they couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And there wasn't deep bullying. She just was like, I don't want to be here. I don't like it. I don't feel good here. And they decided, you know what? We see you. She felt invisible, Jenny. That's what it was. She felt invisible. And they said, we see you. You have a lot to offer. We would like to make you the official greeter of all the students at the school. She got a banner, she got a title, and she had to be there 15 minutes early. Or maybe it was 30. I can't remember, but it was some significant time early. And she had to stand at the door and she had to hold it open and she had to greet everyone by name as much as she could. She didn't know everybody's name, and she felt important. In a week, she turned around. She was like super jazzed. She felt she mattered. She could contribute. Jenny always talks about feeling valued, but it's about contributing. So that's a way that kids feel they can contribute. And our education systems can prime kids for this and make them expected and feel efficacious that they can contribute. Another last story, EJ, before I let you go on to Carrie. Last story is from a young man in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And he just hated school. He was super creative, really vivacious, always boy, ADHD, too much energy, Teachers were like, sit still. He had some great teachers along the way he was really interested in architecture, and his parents kept the love of architecture alive outside of school, but he kept skipping class. He was just bored. Skipping class, didn't see the relevance, didn't think it mattered. Why am I even here? And he eventually got kicked out of high school, almost. Well, basically, his school person says, we can't handle you because he was super disruptive. And he moved to a new program that was called Iowa Big, which drew students from 3 school districts. And they went to their school for half the time. So they could be in high school, they could be on their football team, they could go to prom, all that, see their friends. And the other half the time, they went to this community center that had received requests for projects from the community, real projects from businesses, from the city, and from nonprofits. And they were to execute in teams. The students were to execute these projects. So one of the projects he worked on was that there had been a big flood and a pedestrian bridge downtown had been washed out. And the city wanted to know, how should we rebuild the bridge? Should it be in the same place? Should it be different? The minute he showed up to this program, he said he felt like he'd been in an airtight container and all of a sudden there was oxygen. So he felt like he could contribute. So he did that project. He did a million other projects. He felt so valuable and he just took off. He went on, got a full ride to a university, double majored. He's like, has a great career now in clean energy. He founded his own organization. Like real talented kid who just hadn't been given a chance to contribute. And so that connection between knowledge acquisition and knowledge application is, I think, going to be essential.
Let me toss a question at you, Rebecca, and at Carrie, which is, in reading and thinking about this, there seems to be a big tension and contradiction in a lot of what we're thinking about AI, which is to say, whole lot of us are very uneasy, as Carrie suggested, about what chatbots are doing to kids. And there's the idea of putting limits on, what age would kids engage in chatbots. On the other hand, when people talk about the schools, they talk about using AI to tailor curricula for particular kids where you can figure out with the teacher's input, figure out how to engage them when they're not, how to speed them up if they can actually go beyond the curriculum. How does that really differ with chatbots? How do we think about, these things we might use AI to do to help kids without having AI do the damage we worry and we've seen some evidence of that they can do to kids? How do we keep those two thoughts in our heads at the same
Yes.
time? Go ahead.
Very carefully, and then I'll pass it to Carrie because we've been looking at this with our AI task force report in depth. There are, and I'm glad you brought it up because I don't want to just say the problems. There are great uses of generative AI. Predictive AI has been around in education for a long time. It gives you right or wrong answers. It's helpful for, adaptive learning programs. Generative AI to bring to life learning but it has to be bounded to vetted content because otherwise kids are getting all sorts of crazy stuff. And it has to be embedded in pedagogical practice. So great examples of AI use that could help kids feel like they matter. One is AI helping kids on the fringes of the classroom and of the school participate more because it's hard to matter if you aren't actually participating. That's kids with neurodivergent kids with learning differences, English language learners, and anybody who's struggling. So AI is been highly effective when bringing to life digital texts, which is I'm reading it, I don't quite get this concept, I can ask interactivity. I've read this paragraph 3 times, can you please explain it to me in a dogs, puppies, as an example. I don't know, I'm making that up, but I've seen this because they're interested and it will sort of do a sidebar explanation for kids. Really helpful for students to be able to access the content and stay with it and learn more. And then they feel more competent and they can participate and engage. Neurodivergent kids, really huge potentials. One of my most moving examples that we found is the ability of AI to help with making a copy of kids' voices, digital voice copy, for kids with aphasia, which is a communication problems, who haven't been able to communicate to their peers or teachers, and now through AI can communicate with them. I mean, it's game changing. So there are real bounded uses that are incredibly helpful for schooling and for learning. That's very different, and I'll pass to Carrie here, from kids outside of school going onto a chat bot through social media, having it do their homework for them, and having just totally open-ended, unmediated discussions that, one case started with homework help with ChatGPT and 5 months later ended with ChatGPT telling them how to tie the knot to commit suicide. Like, it's just, not every kid, but potentially terrible.
Jerry, before you come in, I just want to read. We got some really good questions. I mean, the heartening thing about AI is a lot of people out there in our country, citizens, are concerned about this and thinking clearly about the problems. So I just want to read 3 questions quickly, and then you can take this wherever you want. In the age of AI, when students find it easier to talk to bots than parents or even friends, what kinds of guidelines should schools adopt when it comes to kids interacting with bots? Can we force bot companies to make bots reiterate that they are not human? That's actually a really rather good idea, full disclosure about bots. Another question raised, there is a difference between chat bots that can be used as tools to think with and companion AI bots that are designed for a different purpose. How do we support educators to know and understand the difference? And then somebody wanted to know, what does all this mean for people who are no longer in school, the 25 to 64 people? I wanted to put that on the table, but I think those 2 questions really get at some of these tensions. Carrie, take it away, and then I want to go back to Jennifer about 2 issues. Carrie.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of ties all of these things together is the need to be strategic and intentional when we're inviting the use of this technology into classrooms, which is not something that we see all the time. Again, life is moving a mile a minute. It is moving 10 miles a minute in the world of AI. And so I've worked with educators right now, and their eyes have just like popped open when I said, oh gosh, over the summer, Google Classroom now has 50 new AI embedded tools in the tool that you're using every single day. They didn't even know that that was happening. And so what I would encourage people to think is almost taking like a human first approach. From my perspective and my lens, my kid is not a guinea pig. And just because something says AI doesn't mean it's necessarily effective, doesn't mean it's pedagogically sound, it doesn't mean it's for use in the classroom. And a lot of the people who are coming forward and saying, I've got this great new tool, it's ed tech, it's AI, it's whatever it is, they're doing it because they're trying to make a lot of money. And the question around big tech and their influence here is key. Because these guys have a lot of money, they're trying to make a lot of money, they're trying to monetize our kids, and we have a responsibility. We as humanity have a duty of care. They should have a duty of care and responsibility around the impact of these tools on our kids. Now, we want them to use it. Like, I want to be a part of the process as a parent to say, great, we're going to be using AI in the classroom. It's going to free up all of this time for teachers. Here's how they're going to use it. And with all this time, here's what they're going to do with it. Here are the soft skills. Here are the human skills that we're going to have time to really dig into and engage your kids in. Because frankly, parents and families want more of that in the classroom. They want less of just the memorization, the antiquated way that we kind of approach education. They want to have teachers have more time and more autonomy to engage their kids on those aspects of education. So there is a lot of good. But again, our kids aren't guinea pigs, and we want to make sure that we're doing this with the best tools we know about, tools that are educationally sound, all of those things. Now, I do think, when it comes to the question of AI chatbots, when it comes to the question of responsibility, all of these things, like should chatbots be literally like telling on themselves and disclosing the fact that I am not a human, and you should go and ask your mom, you should go and ask your dad. These are part of the regulations that we think are critically important, especially for the exposure that our kids get under the age of 18, because there is such a risk, because our kids are looking and they're little sponges, and they're wanting to get more information, and they're really, like, frankly, they're a captive audience that is waiting to soak all of this stuff up. So we think that those pieces are critically important, and we want to know where the data is going. So if there is, whether it's in school or whether it's in your living room or whether it's in your bedroom, a kid who is saying, I'm feeling lonely. I don't think I belong on the planet. There should be, and there is technology that is available that should send a trigger to mom and dad, or some kind of alert to mom and dad. There's technology right now. Technology like Bark that will send me a text when my kid is texting somebody else with something that could potentially be triggering, or something I need to have a follow-up conversation. There's no reason why that can't be regulated, why we can't be utilizing this technology to make sure that mom and dad are having those conversations, are aware of what's being disclosed. And we should be making sure that these companies have a duty of care and a responsibility to report when kids are in danger.
Your care is a great idea. Jennifer, two questions I want to put to you that you wanted to talk about. One is your idea about the long arm of the job, and I'm curious how affects your theories about that. You can explain the term. And the other is you suggested, and it's a real, it's a central issue in some of these AI debates, is, would universal basic income help us? And what are the problems with thinking about UBI? And I know you and Kerry both wanted to address that. So take it from there, and also respond to any of these other issues that have been raised by our, by our watchers out there, our listeners.
Well, thanks so much, EJ. I will say universal basic income would be a great start potentially, but necessary, but not enough. We as humans, as we've talked about today, need to feel valued, but we also need an opportunity to add value. And so as policymakers, as community leaders, as workplace leaders, we need to think about how are we going to protect that basic human need that all humans have to add value to the world. I mean, just to zoom out and to talk about what Rebecca and to talk about what Carrie are talking about, the bandwidth required today for caregivers, be it teachers, therapists, parents, to not only have a deep vested interest in children's real life worlds, but also now having the secondary task of having to take as much interest in their online worlds as well. It is requiring so much bandwidth for the average adult. And so, what I would love people to think about today on this call is that if we want to make a dent and to prevent youth mental health and to make a dent in the youth mental health crisis, we need to be going upstream and taking care of the adults in their lives to make sure they have support systems, they are resilient. And one of the best places we can do this is the workplace, where they spend a third of their waking hours, a third of their lives. So I would just encourage people on this call to think about how you can reinforce a sense of mattering so that the long arm of the job has a positive impact. It has a positive spillover in our family life so that parents can go home with the bandwidth they need to be the first responders to their kids' struggles. And workplaces can be these places. I have seen it. I have seen it in my reporting. I talk about it in my book, Mattering. It already exists. It is not a huge lift. And by the way, even the least human-centered companies have a vested interest to have employees who are engaged, because that is what drives productivity. So we are all in alignment that the adults need to be engaged in the world around them, in their workplaces. That's what's going to give them the resilience to be the teacher and the parent that they want to be in this challenging world.
I won't ask you to identify the least human-centered companies for this
I think we
discussion.
already know, EJ. I think they've made
The
headlines.
I want to ask to close. We promised to close at 11:30. Am I correct about this? I couldn't ask AI, so I'm asking my fellow panelists. The basically. Why don't each of you to go to Carrie and Rebecca? I'll let you close, Rebecca. But so let me ask: when you think about this, what are you worried about most, and what are you most hopeful about? Particularly as this affects, in Carrie's case, our kids, and in Rebecca's case, on education more generally.
A lot of what Jennifer was saying, I have a senior in high school. He just turned 18 last week. Oh my gosh. And he's going through a lot of firsts right now. And one of the firsts was, just a couple weeks ago where we decided he was going to have his first job. And it was really difficult for him, even as a teenager, to come up, well, what is that first job going to be? Because a lot of the first jobs where you would get that first experience. What is it like to show up on time, to keep a commitment, to, take direction from someone, to take feedback, all of these little basic things that you get outside of just, the responsibility of your job, but all of these really important things you have to learn as a teenager. It was really hard to actually find that first experience because so many of these first jobs are now being taken over by AI. If you're going to self-checkout at CVS or the grocery store, you know that like that teenage kid is not there anymore. Luckily, we found him one, so he's gathering up all the carts in the parking lot. So don't worry, he's going to learn it. But when we think about the world that we're giving our kids right now, I worry about him as he's making big choices that are going to have long-term impacts because, I'm not just worried about this kid till he gets his high school diploma. I'm in this thing for life. I want him to have a choice-filled life and have him feel deeply connected because I want a long-term happy family, right? And when I think about, oh gosh, we got to make post-secondary decisions in college. Like I can see folks that are leaving, college right now, struggling to find that first job because they're not there anymore. And AI is replacing a lot of those, again, first after college experiences where you get your legs under you and you have you start to build that confidence and that experience that you're going to need for more senior level positions that maybe have not been replaced by AI yet. So what is that going to look like for him? And if he's going to go to college and take on an incredible amount of debt as is required in the United States, what is that return on investment going to look like for him? Am I setting him up for a life experience where he's not going to feel comfortable giving me those grandbabies that I'm going to want someday because he's not going to be able to afford them? Is he going to be able to afford to buy a house? I'd love to keep him in this house forever, but I think he eventually wants to have his own family and only experience. But if he's saddled with that much debt, he's not going to get that first job. I'm worried about all of that for him. So as we embrace this exciting new technology, I'm also in the back of my mind thinking about, okay, well, how can I prepare him and get him career ready and future ready? So what does that college experience need to look like? Does he need to maybe change his trajectory a little bit so that he can be part of this, global economy that's embracing AI? And what do I need to know as a parent? But I got to tell you this, I need help because I don't even me doing this all day every day, I don't know everything. So I need folks to help give me the information I need so he can be making good decisions because long term, like I want him to be a happy, choice filled, contributing young man. And we got to all do this together.
Rebecca?
Well, I think the thing I'm most excited about is, and again, having spent a year with all my colleagues doing this deep dive research, is I can see where AI could push our educational experience, could push the student experience to be way more enriched, way more relevant, way more meaningful, promote a sense of mattering and real civic agency in young people. I can see where we could be. That is not where we are now. And so the thing that worries me is how do we get from where we are now to there. That's the thing that I think worries me most. Are we going to have the collective will? Can we reach across the aisles, as Carrie said? Can technology companies, parent groups, teacher unions, management, education leaders, everybody come together and hold hands and be like, okay, let's go there together. I don't know. That's certainly what we will keep trying to push for, and we're happy for as many partners as possible. And we will make that call when we launch the report next month. The one last thing I want to leave, which isn't really in my answer, but it does make me think based on our conversation here. The legislation that Carrie's been working for is great around this idea of limiting the exposure of AI companions, AI friends that are really able to emotionally manipulate kids if they go off the rails, and that's a real danger you don't want, to under 18. But our young, the prefrontal cortex brain development ends around 25. So I think a lot about our 18 to 25-year-olds who are outside of the K-12 system and a little bit more parental control. And I'm not sure, I'm worried they might be slipping through the cracks. So over to you, Jenny or EJ.
I want to. I think we're at our time. Well, what I want to do is to close in the following way. And obviously, I want to say thank you to everybody, which I will. But I consulted AI because I wanted to sort of have good thinking about thinking. And I think one of the things about the AI revolution is, will we humans keep thinking? And AI gave me some wonderful thoughts on this. And who better to consult on a matter like this than Albert Einstein? And there are two wonderful thoughts from Albert Einstein. Thank you, AI. One is, the world we have created is a product of our thinking. And I really do think that when we think about AI, we have to remember we humans are creating it. And it's a challenge. Our challenge is to create an AI that is pro-human, not anti-human. And that's what a lot of this discussion is about. And the other Einstein quote, again, thank you, AI, is, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, which I think suggests to us that we need a lot of engagement from the people outside the world of technology, interacting with the people in the world of technology, so that this technology can work for us all and not against us all. And that's why I appreciate the work your task force is doing, Rebecca. And I just want to thank Jenny and Carrie and Rebecca and our great audience. And I'm going to be thinking about how to make people feel mattered all day, Jenny. So thank you for that inspiration. And again, thanks everybody for joining us.